Well, welcome to another episode, Pound for Pound Box Report, episode 213. I'm your host, Michael. Joining me this week, Gail from Communities Digital News, Jacob from Jab Hook, Daniel from The Inscriber. What's going on, ladies and gents?
Evening, everybody.
Hello.
Is your World Cup team still alive?
Yeah, what happened? What happened with Germany today? Oh my goodness!
Oh my God. Well, Mexico dodged a complete bullet, and they should be eating kimchi for the rest of the tournament.
Yeah, so did Argentina, if we're going to be really honest about it, because they
Well,
hadn't
we're
been
not
playing.
here to talk about that.
Yeah, indeed. So for those who are new, Pound for Pound Box Report, Pound for Pound Box Report, live YouTube show, weekly podcast, as well as blog discussing all things boxing. The motto is, when boxing is good, we will talk about it. When it's bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line is, if it concerns boxing, we will talk about it. If you want to find out all information regarding Pound for Pound Boxing Report, blog page is the place to go to. P4pboxreport.wordpress.com is the link. You check the right of the blog page to the links for the pages and channels on Facebook, G+, YouTube, Twitter. Twitter handle is at P4P Boxing Report, as well as Tumblr. If you also check the right of the page, you can find the links to where I listen to the show: SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher Radio, Player FM for the folks over in the UK, as well as Mixcloud. Let's get this show started. Normally, I always start the show with ladies first. I'm gonna do that again with Gail. Ladies first, talking ladies boxing. To me, the biggest fights of the latter half of the week/weekend, a doubleheader that took place in Detroit, I believe it was. Claressa Shields, Hanna Gabriels, Christina Hammer versus Tori Nelson. Shields beat Gabriels by unanimous decision. Hammer beat Tori Nelson by unanimous decision as well. They both got into a dust-up in the aftermath. Shields fight, Gabriels gave her a really tough go. Put her down the first round with a uppercut left hook combination. But Shields, she got herself up and dusted herself off. Came back, pretty much, not saying had her away, but she was the clear winner. Gabriels fought hard all the way. Christina Hammer, for those who have seen, if this is the first time you've seen Christina Hammer fight, you have to be very impressed by her. Very technically sound, does the basics very well, has an outstanding jab, outstanding footwork, and she dominated Tori Nelson from moment one on. Clear-cut, easy decision win. It turned out to be more of a sparring session than it was a competitive matchup. Gail, talk about those fights for me, please.
Really a good introduction for people to women's boxing if they've never seen women's boxing. You know, it looks a lot like the guys, doesn't it? It really does. The first fight was a excellent display of skill. Hammer, as you said, is so technically sound. She's very tall. She's 5'11", in the middleweight division. You know, even for a man, that would be on the, little on the taller side. And she looks to me like a lot of classic European boxers, primarily the Klitschko brothers. She fights do. She's very straight up and down. She's solid on her feet. Her jab is her strength. She doesn't put a foot wrong. You never see her off balance, running out of the way. She's just as solid technically as they come, and she's got some pop and use it. And she pretty much used her opponent as a punching bag, who did come to fight. You know, she gave it everything she had. It just simply wasn't enough with Hammer. And so that's, one very classic style. And then you've got Shields, who, up against Gabriels. Gabriels came to play. She was not there just for a paycheck. Now, she's a champion. She's a title holder at 154 pounds. And she didn't drop those belts. She held on to those. She came up to 160 to take the fight with Shields. And she was serious about giving it a go. So serious that she popped Shields in the first round and sat her ass down on the canvas. And that's a first. That is a first in her career. And it wasn't a bad knockdown. It truly was a pop on the chin. And in all fairness, Shields was off balance. She was not steady on her feet when she got hit. So it was one of those knockdowns where you sit back, you sit backwards down hard on your butt. But it woke her up. It woke her up. And she had a rough and tumble fight from there on out. She ended up getting cut on the cheekbone. She looked like she'd been in a fight. She did clearly win. She had much better rounds as the fight went on. Claressa is a notoriously slow starter. She has got to overcome that. She's getting better at it. And thankfully for her, her fights are going more rounds, so she's getting away with it. But she will not be able to do that against Christina Hammer. And yeah, there was a little scuffle after. She was asked, Shields was asked in the ring by Showtime's reporters, in fact, it was Steve Farhood, as I recall. What about Hammer? And, she watched your fight. She's here ringside. Shields called her out. Hammer, come here. I'm going to kick your ass. And Hammer came up into the ring. Now, from what I could see and from what I've heard since, Hammer came up and put her hands right under Shields' shoulders and gave her a good, nice shove, called her a biatch, apparently. And they decided they were going to scuffle. The camps all got into it. They're all in the ring. And, it was all good, clean fun.
Sell the fight, ladies. Sell the fight.
Sell the fight. Thank you. Absolutely. I know a lot of people that I read criticized, oh, that was low class. They shouldn't have done that. What are they thinking? Come on, folks. Male boxers have been doing this for decades. And you're right. Sells a fight. They get into it. Sometimes there's a little truth to the animosity. Sometimes it's just business. It's just that's what they do for a living. And hey, more butts in the seats, better living I make. I do think there's, a little professional jealousy back and forth there. I don't think it's personal. I really do think it's just about business. So what remains to be seen now is how quick do we make a fight between these two top women middleweights? And where is it going to take place? And truth be told, it needs to be in Europe. It needs to be in Europe. That's where the bigger audiences and bigger money is for women's boxing. Claressa has had a couple of fights now in Detroit. They're getting very modest audiences. Hammer could put 10,000 butts in the seats in Germany. I hope Claressa has the, female equivalent of the male anatomy, the big brass ones, to go over there and do it. It'd be a great payday for her. Hey, and if she loses, you do a rematch. Make sure you have a rematch clause and make the second fight here if that's what it comes down to. But these are good rivalries for women's boxing. This is all to the good. And for anybody that got their feathers ruffled over hearing a little rough talk from the ladies, oh, for Pete's sake, get over yourselves and get used to it.
I'll go to you, Jacob and Daniel. Your thoughts on the fight and your thoughts on the kind of dust up between the two ladies. As I said it during Gail's commentary. Sell the fight. That's all that was to me.
Yeah, I mean, to talk about the fights first, what I was really impressed with the Shields is that, Gail was right. She was her feet were a little bit, they just weren't in the right position, and just the punch did land at like a little short uppercut, and it did clip her. But I think because it clipped her in the force of it and the way her feet were positioned, she just got sat down on her butt. But what I was impressed with was that Shields didn't do what a lot of boxers do, which is try to get up too fast. She just kind of sat there, collected herself, got to her feet. She knew she had the 10 seconds to get up, and then she went to work. So, she got caught, and that happens, but it's what they do after, that kind of adversity or whatever, especially in the first round. But yeah, I mean, it was a good fight. Gabriels came to fight. Like Gail said, she wasn't going to just lay down. I think a lot of people were, probably counting her out. And of course, she was in Shields, close to her hometown, the vicinity. So, I mean, she had everybody pretty much on her side. But it was a good fight. And then the Hammer fight, again, can't add too much more. Hammer's very technical. He's got a really good jab, uses it really well. But that fight with the Shields and Hammer is very intriguing because I could see Shields giving Hammer some problems, but vice versa. I could see Hammer if she fights well and uses that jab, giving Shields problems. So to me, it's a very intriguing fight. It's a unification fight, and yeah, the kind of dust up. I didn't really read anything into it. I saw the same comments that there's low class and all of that. I didn't think so. I mean, if it had turned into a full scale riot, maybe we'd be talking about differently. But it didn't. We've had many boxers, sell fights and even in any sport, you have people talking trash all the time. When you're that competitive and you want to prove that you're the best. You're going to say things and you're going to, kind of show your alphaness. So I didn't really see anything negative there. I mean, they talking to each other, but, I'm super excited to see that fight. And I agree with Gail in the sense that, if Shields wants to get the most money, probably Europe would be the best way to do that. And she fought in the Olympics. She's the 2-time back-to-back gold medal winner, and she's been all over the world before. So it shouldn't be any different than that. So I think that's a very makeable fight.
Your thoughts, Daniel?
First on the fight, I do agree with Gail that shot that Gabriels landed didn't really hurt Shields. But it did wake her up. It did get her mad about the whole situation. And she answered back. You could tell with the left hooks that she was landing that she was hurting Gabriels. And in the exchanges, she was landing the left hooks even as Gabriels was trying to get out of the exchanges. And probably the main reason why the mouse that you see on Gabriels' face was on her left eye and not her right eye. Because normally you would think a left hook, the mouse would be under the right eye, but the way Shields was landing that punch, as Gabriels was going out, it left her right there, and that punch was there all night. The right hand was getting more consistent. One thing that I really like, and we have to remember this, I think this is her first fight under John David Jackson, is I would have expected Shields, at least from the last couple of fights, to go balls to the wall after that knockdown. Just try to completely take out Gabriels. But she didn't. She was smart. She was patient. She started to parry the jab. She started getting the combination. She let Gabriels tire herself out a bit, while also, like I said, making sure that she can counter well, because there was a lot of times when Gabriels put Shields on the ropes, but Shields was able to bob and weave pretty well, make sure that not a lot of the good punches landed on her, while at the same time be able to counter and land her punches well. So it was a good showing by Shields. It's like I said, it's the first showing from Don Jackson. It's going to take a couple of fights to fully see what he can mold her to. As far as the confrontation, the low class part, people get that because they've already had an opinion about Shields. So they were not going to give her a chance. So just another way to just say, oh, low class, the way she was before. But in reality, it's a way to sell the fight. And if you were thinking about doing a face-off, they already technically had a face-off the last time Shields fought. When she fought Tori Nelson. They already had a face-off. This time, it was just mainly selling the fight, being confrontational, and Shields, like I said, Shields is a believer in herself. She really does believe that she can take out Hammer, and she's willing to even knock out her family members. Because I think the real tall person in Hammer's camp, if I'm not correct, is her brother. So that just made it just sell the fight. And here's the part though where I differentiate with Gail. I would agree when it comes about the money that the fight should be in Europe. But I think Shields is prideful enough where she says, no, let's fight in Detroit. You can sell out arenas. Let's fill Little Caesars Arena in Detroit. Because Flint will come out if it's that big of a fight. Not to mention that you can try to put a fight with the Darrell brothers on the undercard. Because obviously we know David Benavidez and Anthony Darrell have to fight. So there's a good possibility you can make a decent card there, but that only works if you go to Detroit. You can't take it anywhere else in the U.S. If you try to do anywhere else in the U.S., no, then you're better off going to Germany. That's a safer bet. But I think Shields might be too prideful enough and too young, not so young as that she hasn't traveled, young in the fact that she'll be stubborn in this.
They come in 2 packs of 8.
That ultimately she'll say, I'm not fighting outside of Detroit.
I just think that's gonna. I think that's gonna be trouble for her. I am not convinced Detroit can come out in those numbers. For a fight like that. I mean, they are not getting. They're not getting 5,000 people now. They're not even getting 3,000 people now. That's that is a small crowd. And for what it is, it's not bad, but this is on a whole nother level. I mean, we are talking about a 4-belt true unification fight. That's a big fight. That's a big fight. But women's professional boxing just does not have a big stronghold here yet. It'll get there. I'll tell you what will help it get there. Ladies have to fight 3-minute rounds. I'm going to harp on it again. And it's not the athlete's fault. And it's not even their camp's fault. The commissions can sanction 3-minute fights anytime they want. And several of them do. But apparently Michigan doesn't. Nevada is very haphazard. You do see more women's 3-minute rounds in the eastern United States. New York, New Jersey, they'll do it. I'd like to see that become the standard. And a championship fight needs to go 12 rounds too, not 10. And that would help a lot. But until then, she is going to leave a lot of money on the table if she fights here. And I think this is going to be a really tough fight for Shields. But you're right. She is used to traveling because of her amateur background. So that part of it is not a big disadvantage to her at all. I say she goes for it.
That's the interesting part about it. The travel was never going to be an issue. The travel was never going to be an issue. It's the fact that she's young. And unfortunately, we've seen she can get into a little bit boneheaded decisions as a young woman.
Yeah. As any 21 and 22-year-old with a little bit of fame does.
Yep. Yeah. Now, and this is the part of me where I say money may not be an issue. If money really was the big issue, I think she would have tried to go after one of the. I think there was interest in Golden Boy at one point. They might have tried to go with her, sign them, but she signed with a local promoter because she wants to build her name in Michigan. Yeah. And to her, it doesn't matter. It doesn't look like it matters to her how much money she makes as long as she can build a base. So that's why I think, as dumb as it sounds, I think she's perfectly fine. She's perfectly fine with leaving money on the table if it means that the fight will be in Michigan.
Um,
I think it
Go ahead,
depends
Jacob.
on how much money we're talking about, though, because there's a difference between, you know, you getting paid $1 million and then and I don't know anything about the financials of what this fight will bring in, but if you were offered $1 million or, you know, $500,000 and then someone comes and offers you $10 million, there's a disparity there on how much money you're leaving on the table. You know, I mean, that's a lot of money. And I know what you're saying, Daniel. You know, I think I do agree with you. Shields is prideful and she wants to, you know, do things for Michigan. But, you know, if she has $10 million, you know, or whatever that amount would be, you know, she can do it. But, you know, maybe she gets into promotions and starts doing local fights for her, you know, her community and tries to bring fights there. So, I mean, I really think it's more than just leaving money on the table. It's how much are we talking about?
Well, what's also going to make a difference is if you're talking about, you know, are they going to take a percentage of the gate, which they should? You know, any other promotional opportunities, back end kind of stuff, which then the attendance is going to make a big, big difference. And remember, for the women, we are not talking about 7 figures and probably barely talking about 6 figures. I mean, I think you're probably talking about, I really think you're probably talking the difference between 50 grand and 100 or 150 grand. However, that's still a lot of money to a lot of people.
Before we move on to talk other fights, simple question, folks. Let's just say this fight is made and it happens presumably this fall. Is this the biggest bout in women's boxing history?
No, I don't think so. As good as Hammer is, and as much notoriety as Shields has been able to generate, you can't forget what Cecilia Brakas has been able to do. She is still, in my opinion, by far the #1 professional women's boxer on the planet. And Brakas does put 15,000 butts in the seats. And the fact that she was able to convince her own country, who had banned boxing of all kinds, by the way, not just women, in Norway, for her to get to the point where she was finally able to have a sold out arena fight in her home country. That's a signature accomplishment beyond what happens in the ring. And she did, of course, happen to have a great fight. But nevertheless, and let's remember also, Brakas is currently a unified champion already and has been for some time at welterweight. And until Bud got his 4 belts for a little period of time there, she was boxing's only unified champion, male or female. Having said that, this is still a great fight. One of the best fights you could put on, you know, from an intrigue point of view. I want to see it. I hope they do it this year. They may want another tune-up fight. Who knows? But I hope they get the job done and we see it, you know, maybe late fall or late October, early November would be a fine time for that fight.
Move on to other fights. There was a fight on ESPN Plus, took place in Mexico. MIguel Berchelt, after a pretty lengthy layoff, fighting Jonathan Viktor Barros. Didn't see the fight, but from what I've read, Berchelt, who won by 3-round stoppage, I think he knocked him down. From what I read in the 2nd round, finished him off in the 3rd. Was asked about it. Well, put it this way, I'll give you an opportunity to talk about it, because when I was asked about it, it says the fight was such easy work. There's not even time. Don't even bother trying to look it up. It was just that much of a whitewash. So I'll just rely on you guys. If you've seen the fight, your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, oh, go ahead, Gail.
No, I'm just going to say I'll defer to the gentlemen if any of them have seen it. I did see it. Jacob, what'd you think?
I mean, first of all, Berchelt looked huge in there compared to Barros, and I mean, Berchelt's an animal, man. That guy, he didn't waste any time. He went right at him and was pounding this guy out. And I'm surprised it lasted 3 rounds. Like I had a feeling it was going to be a short-lived fight. I think his last fight went like 3 rounds in Cancun, something like that. But I mean, he blasted him out. The guy was, I think he's Argentinian. I think he was way overmatched, even though he got knocked down and they wanted to his corner stopped the fight. He was kind of protesting, but he had nothing for Berchelt. Berchelt was just, he was all over him. He was landing big shots on him. You know, he dropped him, and it was a good performance, but a showcase performance.
Yeah, 2 words to describe the fight: blow and out. Blow out. Yeah, it was ugly. Barros was coming up. His best fights have been at featherweight. So he was coming up. Yeah, so it made Berchelt look huge, and he's in great shape. He's very comfortable. The only reason it went 3 rounds is that Berchelt blasted Barros right at the bell. I mean, literally, Barros got counted out after the bell of the 2nd round. And I thought, is this corner going to send him out for the 3rd? He did. And they gave it literally seconds. I really thought the referee would stop the fight. But, we are talking about Mexico. They do tend to let guys go a little longer. But his corner stopped it, which was the right thing to do. And it also provided Barros some cover, because then the guy, then he can say, hey, oh, I was still in it. Oh, I wanted to continue. Oh, my corner made me stop. Everybody's good with that. What I'm unclear about with Berchelt, he took out Vargas, then he took out Mura, handily in both cases. That's been over a year plus ago that he fought Mura. And, he's been fighting these lesser opponents in Mexico. I'm just not sure what he's waiting around for. The smaller guys in the smaller weight divisions do not age well. Berchelt's, far from old, but I'm not quite sure why he is stalling, taking on some tougher competition. I mean, I do kind of get it why he ran away from Lomachenko. I mean, he's not stupid. He doesn't have a death wish. I can see where he might want to make a little more money first before he does something like that. And he is relatively young. I did just want to check his age. He is still just 26. But TikTok, come on, let's go for it. I think the next fight likely for Berchelt, and he also has called him out, is MIguel Roamar. I would be good with that. That'd make a good little fight.
Machado's not doing anything. He's still waiting to make his defense.
There you go. There's another good one. Yeah, I'd take that too. Berchelt barely worked up a sweat, man. He could get right back in there. He could have another fight in 2 months. Easy.
Is he being offered the big fights though? Because I don't ever hear his name really.
Yes, Berchelt got an absolute serious inquiry from the Lomachenko camp last year, and Berchelt at the time called him out. It's funny, he thought Rigondeaux was going to beat Lomachenko. Well, everybody's entitled to be wrong once in a while. But yeah, he after he made all that noise, he kind of went silent and stayed away from Lomachenko. And I get it. At 26, if he doesn't really think he's quite ready for Lomachenko, I respect that at this point. But there's plenty of better opponents than an Argentinian featherweight. Come on.
First of all, before I go to you, Daniel and Jack, I want to give a shout out to Truth and Facts. He's listening on this, checking us out on the live YouTube, and K Izzle, 25, aka Miss Mrs. Fox, on Twitter. Longtime fan of the show. Also check out her gaming page, her gaming channel on Twitch, also by Miss Vicious Fox. So thank you for joining us and listening. Go ahead, Daniel and Jacob.
Okay, I didn't see the fight. But I saw enough pictures and enough like clips to know that wasn't much of a fight at all. I'm with Jacob. I'm surprised that thing went 3 rounds. But ultimately, it's a showcase fight. It's a second showcase fight for Berchelt, and in my mind, there was really no need for it because, okay, he called out MIguel Roamar. Roamar is his mandatory, and Roamar had a fight the same night, which he did the same thing. He blasted out his opponent. So this was, to me, if it was Berchelt's real comeback fight from an injury, I'll be okay with it. But this is the second one. So there's no point to it. Like, okay, fight your mandatory, fight Roamar, and then try to go after Machado. But it is what it is. We understand they're gonna try to make as much money as possible, and ultimately, he'll get a fight eventually. I say he's gonna get a fight eventually. 130 with Lomachenko no longer has that boogeyman, but like I say, it's a fight to me that didn't seem necessary considering he could have fought his mandatory the same night.
I've heard rumors that Vargas wants to fight him again.
Why?
Yep,
that's what I heard.
Because Mexicans are prideful.
Yeah, exactly. And Vargas is just a little tiny bit crazy.
Just no to that. No. Capital N, capital O, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. Just no.
But you know what? A lot of people would love it. Honest to God. It would sell. It would sell.
It would absolutely sell.
Yeah.
Yep.
And call me crazy, but I'd love to see him fight Lomachenko. I think that would be an interesting fight.
It would be. It would have been at 130. The point is Berchelt gonna get to lightweight with enough time where Lomachenko isn't already then at 140? Because it's not that far behind.
But will Arum allow that fight? Allow him to go back down to 130, or will he make Berchelt move up to 35?
Probably 35. He'd make a move up to 35.
Yeah, I think he'd move. I think he'd move up for that fight, and he's not in the position to dictate terms on that fight. Let's face it.
Yeah, Loma's the A on that side.
Yeah. So it's whatever Loma wants to do, and I'm sure Loma could make it, but he doesn't need to. He doesn't need to work that hard, and he seems.
It's not even.
He seems to be carrying the weight really well. Lomachenko, that is.
Let's move on.
I don't even think it's a.
Go ahead, Daniel.
Sorry about that. I don't think it's just a matter of just making the weight. It's just the fact that luckily Top Rank and Zanford get along pretty well. So it's not a tough fight to make.
Yeah. Well, and Top Rank, they will play with others when they have to. But Bob Arum didn't get to be Bob Arum by spreading around dollars he didn't need to. And if he can keep things in-house, he does. But yeah, Zanfer is one of the folks. Actually, Bob will work with anybody. If the fight is right, the fight makes sense, and the fight can make money for everybody, him most of all, he's fine with it. So I think that this would be fine with him. You're right. He works with Zanfer just fine. I think he likes working with some of the smaller promoters who are very happy to work with him to boost their fights. And the other thing that Top Rank now brings to the table which is an intangible that I think will become more and more and more important, is this. Those of us who did watch the Berchelt fight watched it because ESPN Plus picked it up. So you've got the ESPN Plus advantage, the streaming service for virtually anything Top Rank does now. And not only did Top Rank offer, not only did ESPN Plus offer that fight, you could have your choice of watching it in either English or in Spanish.
And they had the Murray Garcia fight and the other fights that we're going to talk about.
They had the whole card from Great Britain. They had this fight.
I love this app.
They
it's awesome.
Picked up. I'm trying to think what else they picked up. It's sensational. And if you are a person that uses, a streaming device like a Roku or something else, and you're an ESPN Plus subscriber, you got it hooked straight up. You call it right up, and there you go. And the quality on your larger, flat screen type television, spectacular.
Moving on to the UK, Scotland specifically, Glasgow, Scotland. There was a WBC junior welterweight eliminator fight that took place there between rising prospect Josh Taylor and Viktor Postol. Taylor getting the unanimous decision win. I'll go to you, Jacob. I'm not mad at the fact that Taylor won, but what annoys me is once again a fighter winning a close bout, in my opinion, by scores that doesn't reflect how close and how competitive the action was. 118, 110, 117, 110, 119, 108. Ridiculous, in my opinion. I felt it was a 1, 2, 3 point fight that could have went either way. It was that close. It was that competitive. Taylor, he got the knockdown in round 7. For me, it was a first half, second half fight. First half, it was Postol. Second half, it was Taylor. But again, I talk about when boxing is bad, it's going to be talked about here. And another case, Jacob, of in my opinion, inadequate, incompetent judging. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and it was. I think Postol got knocked down in the 10th round.
Oh, I'm sorry, 10th round. I'm sorry. You're right.
First of all, hats off to both guys. It was an excellent fight. It was a really good fight, and to your point, it was extremely competitive and close. The scorecards were. I don't understand the scorecards at all. The good thing about this though is that I believe the right man won. So, regardless of the scorecards, I still would have gave the fight to Taylor. I thought he did enough in the second half of the fight, especially with that knockdown, to just, to edge out, by maybe 2-3 points at the most. But yeah, I mean, it would have been unfortunate if the scorecards were for, the person that that shouldn't have won. Yeah, I mean, judging's always been an issue. It's almost like, and I think we say it on here all the time, it's almost like they turned in their cards before the fight even started, which is unfortunate. But what's crazy here is that it wasn't just, usually it's just one scorecard that's way off. In this case, there was 3, almost identical scorecards, give or take a couple points. So, but Taylor, to talk about the fight, Taylor was, showed that, even at a young up and coming prospect, that, he has the goods. Postol, who we weren't sure about whether he was the same Postol or, if he was in the right state of mind. He put up a good showing. I thought he put up a valiant effort, and he just he lost, and he was competitive, so he has nothing to hang his head about. But Taylor, he's very, he showed that he can win a big fight like this against a credible opponent. And I'm excited to see what else he can do going forward. And I'd love to see Postol back again. So hopefully Postol can stay active and come back again.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was on mute. Your thoughts, Daniel, and then you can follow up, Gail. Are you there, Daniel? I don't think he's there.
Yeah,
Gail?
sorry about that.
Okay.
Okay. I was about to say, like, oh, wow. A scorecard that was bad in Scotland in favor of the Scottish fighter? I'm shocked. I'm shocked that there's gambling in this casino. That's pretty much the thought. I give full credit to Taylor, though. He did beat Postol. It was a very good fight. It's just I've come to the point where I just flat out expect that from UK cards, especially if it's a fight that close. That's why when Marius Hooker won the 141 title from Flanagan, I was purely shocked because I pretty much thought, oh, they're going to give it to Flanagan. It's the UK. We know how they do. And they didn't. In this case, we know Scotland's a little bit more egregious in this area, simply because we've seen the Ricky Burns fights. We've seen at least 2 or 3 fights that he got where he did not deserve the victory. Luckily, in Josh Taylor's case, he did. He did deserve it. He earned it. And ultimately, it was a good fight. But, yeah, that scoring is going to get annoying sooner or later.
Your thoughts, Gail?
Well, here's where it gets annoying to your point. Did the right guy win? Yes, the right guy won, clearly. Were the scorecards out of line? Yeah. So you go back to, well, the right guy won. Well, here's the problem with that. Opponents look at scorecards that are wide and assume them, to tell the truth. And then you have a skewed perspective, which does not benefit anyone. You have one guy who other people maybe think is a lot better than he really is. And maybe he gets a puffed up sense of, I'm a lot better. I think I'm really great. And they think they're a lot better than they really are. And they're difficult when negotiating for future opponents. They get a whacked out sense of what they're worth. You start having trouble making fights. Guys who would make legitimately good opponents say, I don't need any of that. And that's where you start having a problem when you have inaccurate scorecards. Can we do anything about it? No, hell no, it's boxing. And besides, what else would we have to talk about? We get to argue about it every week, when we have crazy scorecards like that. But you have to look at sort of as a win is a win and not get too hung up on scorecards for a lot of reasons. But, are we ever going to fix that? Well, if we could fix this, we could turn our time and attention to some other really critical project in this world that would make us a lot of money and save the planet.
Yeah, but it's just, again, it's still frustrating. And the thing, it'll mislead folks who didn't see the fight. They watch the score. They'll watch it. Maybe not now, but let's just say 5-10 years and now, when you reassess the careers of each guy, and you'll look at this and say, oh, Taylor blew him out. No, he didn't. He was in a really tough battle. So from a narrative perspective, when it comes to either fighters, it can really skew that. That aside, follow-up question before we move on and talk some other action here. Where does Taylor go from here? Is it for certain that he's going to be in the World Super Series junior welterweight tournament? Where does he go? Anyone?
I think he said that he's gonna be part of the tournament, right? So, I mean, I'd love to see him in the tournament. I mean,
Oh, that's by far the best place for him to go, is to get involved in that. These current tournaments have really been well done, well run. The first couple, still playing out, frankly, and it seems to me it gets you quite a few fights, gets you busy, gets you some good paychecks. It's a way to go. If you don't have any, if you don't have any other plans, get on the bus.
Yeah, I think it was supposed to be whoever wins was going to announce that they were going to be part of the tournament, which turned out to be a pretty decent tournament. And tournament is well rounded out. You have at least 2 people that are U.S. based in Prograis and Hooker. Now you have Taylor. And I think you can see here, Radius is supposed to be in there. That tournament is going to be filled out. And ultimately, this makes the case now that they need an actual broadcast channel. I know they have a little deal with a little known channel to stream it in the US, but you can't have that. It was okay with the first 2 tournaments when you pretty much didn't have any American fighters. Now you at least have 2. So it would get on Saarland because apparently Richard Schaefer's completely phased out of now the World Boxing Super Series. It should get on Saarland to find a legitimate channel. Try to talk to Showtime. Try to talk to HBO. Try to talk to ESPN. See if they can broadcast it, because obviously, particularly with Prograis, remember, Prograis is still the mandatory for Jose Ramirez. So that plays into a factor of what Bob Arum wants to do on ESPN Plus.
Absolutely. You read my mind. I mean, ESPN Plus is the obvious place for it. Obvious place to me. They've got the resources. This is working really well for them. And the chatter's picking up. The momentum's picking up. People are realizing, hey, it's been a bit of a boxing desert here the last couple of weeks. If it hadn't been for ESPN Plus, there wasn't a whole lot to see. So their timing could not have been better to sort of fill in these gaps, toss a few fights on. Was Berchelt Barros a blowout? It was embarrassingly bad, but I got to see a little bit of action. It's well staged. They always pay for Jimmy Lennon Jr. to go down there and do his thing. It's all good.
Going to stick in the UK here. To a couple of rising prospects here. One at heavyweight, one at light heavyweight. Going to mention it because we haven't really talked about him much here on Pound for Pound. Anthony Yarde, who stopped a guy by the name of Sek in the 7th round. Daniel Dubois, who knocked out a British heavyweight by the name of Little in round 5. If anyone here saw those fights, please comment about them. But more to the point, for those unfamiliar with Yarde and with Dubois, get some insight into each fighter and your thoughts of them and their progress.
Yeah, I thought I saw both fights. They were on the Murray Garcia undercard, I believe. And, both guys, to me, they showed a lot of patience and a lot of poise in the sense that they didn't try to, just go blast them out, even when they got, a knockdown or they hurt their opponent. But, again, their opponents weren't what I would say are top level. But it's kind of what you do with, young guys that are, working their way up, is you get them the rounds and you see how they perform.
Daniel, Gail, your thoughts?
When it comes to, I didn't see the cards, but there was a little bit interest in going into it. Anthony Yarde, I think that his fight, was for the Commonwealth title, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, so he's always been a little bit more far along than Daniel Dubois as far as into it. They're still pretty good prospects. It's a good thing, like I said, for Frank Warren that they already got them under his stable. But they're developing pretty well. It's gonna take a couple of years for them to fully be fleshed out and to be contenders into it. But I'll probably picture Anthony Yarde being the better one of the two at the moment, unless Dubois makes a really, really good leap within the next year. They're decent kids. Like I said, they're good. They got decent skills. The main thing that's going to be about it is between the two, how far along can they push themselves out from what's starting to be a growing crop of European heavyweights. Because remember, it's not only them, it's Joe Joyce, it's Tony Yoka. So you might see the heavyweight scene in the near future to completely, utterly be dominated by the UK.
Your thoughts, Gail? Well, wait. One more follow-up question for you, Daniel. In when it comes to Yarde specifically, there's been some criticism that he needs to step up his level of competition, especially given the fact that he's ranked so highly, particularly when it comes to the BO, which I believe has him ranked second um, in their latest rankings. Uh, do you agree with that criticism, or are you of the mind that he's still young, he's still developing, even though he's ranked so high in the WBO that he still needs some time to develop?
He still needs time. Like with the WBO, that's understandable. We have to remember, like in the UK, the WBO kind of stands for, I forgot what did they say. I think the Warren Boxing Federation, the Warren Boxing Organization, actually. So it's no secret that they tend to favor fighters that's affiliated with Frank Warren. So I'm not surprised by the ranking, but you have to give the kid time. Yeah, you can't really rush him into that space, not particularly when the top two are Joshua and Wilder. You can say yes.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
You can say yes that okay, Yarde has a little bit better overall technical use than Wilder, but Wilder has an experience and he has that sleeper. So you have to give him time. I'm pretty sure that the way the sanctioning bodies rotate their mandatories, he'll get time. It's just going to have to be a couple of years because obviously, I know we're going to talk about it later, but obviously they're going to want Joshua Wilder at some point. And that gives kids like I said, Yarde, Dubois, Tony Yoka, Joe Joyce, Big Baby Miller, Junior Fa, other fighters like that. It gives them time to catch up. So I understand they need to step up to justify the ranking, but it's a Frank Warren fighter. They're going to get ranked at pretty high, but I think people pretty much understand that it's going to take a bit. It took a bit for Anthony Joshua. It's going to take a bit, same thing for Anthony Yarde.
Your thoughts on Dubois and Anthony Yarde, Gail?
Let me follow up. Yarde is actually fighting at light heavyweight. He may be a heavyweight one of these days, but where he's ranked is in the light heavyweight division. He's still at light heavyweight.
Oh, I made a mistake. My bad. Yeah, Yarde's a light heavyweight. Dubois is a heavyweight.
Yeah. So he is the second ranked contender at light heavyweight. Kovalev holds the belt. The number one ranked contender is Marcus Brown. Yarde's right behind him. Number 3 is, wait for it, Mike Lee. Number 4 is Shawnee Monahan, and it goes down the list. Eliader Alvarez is number 8, who is the opponent for Kovalev on August 4th coming up here in Atlantic City. And you look down the rest of that list, and it does not really impress you. And that's what's such a shame. The light heavyweight division is loaded with talent. Loaded with talent. And you're telling me I'm looking down the light heavyweight rankings, and they haven't got Dmitry Bivol or Artur Beterbiev in the top 15? That's just ignorant. That's just nuts. Nevertheless, Yarde has still falls in the potential category for me. He's 26. Heavyweights are still pretty young at that age. He has not fought a real impressive lineup of talent. He essentially faced a Polish kielbasa maker or something. I mean, the guy was just, it was sad. It was a blowout in 2 rounds.
Kielbasa maker.
Well, you know, we say the pizza boy here, right? So he's Polish. What can I say? Poor guy.
They don't have cabs in Poland?
Well, I'm sure he drives a cab too. Yeah. Well, he's not making kielbasa, right? So that, I think, is becoming a legitimate criticism. There are enough light heavyweights, especially in England, European guys, decent guys on their way up or down, that, you know, Frank should start putting some tougher talent in front of him. Daniel Dubois, however, you know, it's a little bit natural, but he's slightly behind on the development chain. For one thing, he's 20 years old. He's only 20, and he is fighting at heavyweight. I'm very impressed with him. After 9 fights to look that good at 20 at heavyweight, I mean, there's just nothing but positives for him, no matter what happens. You know, he could decide he wants to test himself against a big name and lose. Well, you know, that didn't exactly kill Canelo Alvarez's career when he decided to take a chance against Floyd. I'd be great if Dubois did something like that. Do I think he's really ready? No. Would he get in front of a lot of people? Yeah. Would it impress people? Well, it depends. You can often really impress a lot of fans, even when you lose. It's going to be very interesting to see how they decide to develop Dubois. And either way, you know, good things could happen with both of them. If I had to choose between them, I'm a little more excited about Dubois at this point. And part of it is where they sit. The light heavyweight division where Yarde is just has got so much talent in it. So much talent right now. And really tough talent. The heavyweight division, you know, once you get past the first tier of guys, Wilder and Joshua, obviously, you know, a handful of their key opponents, it's a little more wide open, and there's a little more for him to play with. So, you know, sometimes in boxing, a lot of it is the timing of where your division stands at that moment. You know, if you enter it in one era, you know, versus another 5 or 10 years later, the landscape can really be a lot different. And there's just nothing you can do about that. You know, you play the card you're dealt in that case. Right now, to be a heavyweight with talent, it's a pretty nice thing.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to ask a question, like, for everybody, like, because Jacob brought this up when we talked about Triple G, when he got stripped by the IBF, in a little bit of sense. How hard is it for sanctioning bodies, from impartiality standpoint, to rank the other champions? Because that's what's causing a lot of screw-ups here. The fact that the WBO has that list, like the 4th guy is Shawnee Monahan. Yet, yeah, you don't rank Bibble, you don't rank Beterbiev,
Yeah, it's
who are both champions.
Yeah, it's ignorant. Yeah, it's nuts. Now, some of them do. Some of them do. As well they should. But, we all know that the sanctioning bodies and the commissions make their own damn rules. They do whatever the hell they want, whatever is expedient. Some are worse about it than others. The thing I really object to is the multiple Cracker Jack belts that they have now, so they can earn some
look,
money.
if Klitschko can be off of what? Nearly 2 years off and then be anointed as champ prior to his fight with Joshua. Okay, yeah, they can finagle the rankings any way they want.
Right. And I would rather they just be dead honest and just make their matchups and don't give me any bullshit justification. Don't insult me. Just make the fights you want to make. Fine. We can all see, we all have eyes, we all read, we all know who's deserving of a shot and who's not. If we don't like it, there's lots of ways for us to vote as fans. We don't buy anything, we don't watch, we don't follow those guys, we lose interest. There's a lot of ways for fans to vote with their own self-interest when these sanctioning bodies put on these trumped up fights.
But what's holding back though the sanctioning, or at least one sanctioning body, from saying, yes, I'm gonna rank the champions and the other? Like, is it just one sanctioning body did it and they all just followed suit, or what's the advantage of doing that? I don't understand. If they're trying to make money and get the biggest fights, why wouldn't you want you're a champion to fight another champion?
It's part of its politics. They're playing politics with each other. They're trying to see which promoter is willing to pay their sanctioning fees to get their guy up. Like, there's been extenuating circumstances where they've done it. Like, I think the most recent big example was when the WBC ranked Kovalev as the mandatory challenger to Stevenson. But I think part of it is they don't really want to step in a lot of their toes, because if you rank suddenly one guy or the other and they're pretty equal champions, not one is clear to the other and the other one's just a belt holder, then there's going to be griping of, why do you have the IBF guy ahead of me? My guy's better.
Well,
and they switch it. Why does that sense?
And let's think about it. So you have 4 major sanctioning bodies. If you have one guy with all the belts, well, he can only fight so many times a year. And those sanctioning bodies only make money when men and women get in the ring. So while it's great to have a unified champion like Terrence Crawford, he can only generate, let's say, 2 or 3 fights for the sanctioning bodies in a year. If he holds all 4 belts, that means they're all splitting 2 or 3 fights. Now, if they all have 4 different guys, suddenly you have 12 fights a year. And they can each divide them up and each have, say, 2, 3, 4 fights, more or less, all themselves. So they don't necessarily want to consolidate the inventory down to one guy with all the belts. Not for very long, anyway, which makes it really tough. That is another reason why unifying a division is such a big accomplishment, because it's not only what you do in the ring. You've got to actually, the planets all have to align, basically, for you to have a shot to even get there. So, hats off to people like a Terrence Crawford and a Cecilia Brakas who have managed to unify. And for the guys that really try their absolute hardest to get there. But in today's era, it just gets harder and harder. So it's important for us to remind people what an accomplishment that really is. And, why, absent anything else, when you see somebody like Crawford unify, that puts him head and shoulders above anyone else with equal talent, because it is just that difficult.
Let's move on to some news here. One main bit of news, and this probably be the last time I talk about these two. Well, not necessarily in terms of fighting, but in terms of fighting each other. News broke yesterday basically saying that uh, uh, looks as if a heavyweight unification bout between Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder is a no-go for 2018. Um, Not gonna get into the details because it's just too much to go around and it's just too maddening and too much BS. But um, Frank Warren, Hearn said conducted an interview today, which he explained his side. It looks like you could possibly see the fight April, sometime 2019, and he went into the logistics and how they offered Wilder this, they offered Wilder that. Wilder was talking mess on Twitter today. Uh, in light of all the news yesterday regarding this fight, I'll start with you, Gail. Try to unwrap all that's took place and all that's been said over the past 24 hours or so.
Oh my God. I don't know if I can handle the weight of this assignment, MIguel. It's just crazy, and there's a lot of rumors. One side says one thing, one side says the other. There's been fits and starts. Oh, it's signed. Oh, one guy promised this. Until you see signatures to paper and a news conference scheduled and every single player involved in the same place with the date printed on a big ass banner behind them, nothing is booked. There's nothing done at all. I recommend for everyone to watch this interview. It's fairly long, just pour yourself a drink or something, or get something to do and let it run in the background. You'll find it on YouTube, conducted by, now I'm going to space on the reporter's name, who did the interview. He talks to a lot of these guys. You do a search, you'll find it. Hearn goes into such a level of blow-by-blow detail on when different players spoke to whom, what offers were made, the way the dates have rolled forward given the clock ticking, and the attempt to swoop in and grab that September 15th date when it looked like the Canelo Triple G rematch was shaky. Well, then, of course, that didn't happen. And then he explained in very clear terms why it would be monetary suicide for him to put on a fight anywhere near that fight, which he's absolutely right. That's not going to happen. So when that date became unavailable, it meant that he couldn't possibly do a fight on the 22nd, the week later, and expect to get the kind of revenue it should generate. When fans have got to decide between two fights, they're probably going to watch the rematch because that's a known quantity. And for a lot of American fans in particular, Joshua is still not a household name in the way Canelo is, or even Golovkin for that matter. So that pushes it out 3-4 weeks at least. His preference is to do the fight in a big outdoor arena, right? So we could put a lot of butts in the seats. Well, you don't do that once you get much past the 1st of October in Great Britain. And that's where the fight is going to happen. So that pushes it after the first of the year. And I'm not going to belabor this detail by detail. I urge you to watch it, because part of what will convince you of the accuracy of this narrative is watching Eddie Hearn tell the story in detail, easily, not struggling for how it went down. He is sitting very casually. He's wearing some crazy looking soccer jersey. He's just come from his daughter's school where they had sport day, and he just rattles off, here's what's happened, here's where we are, here's how the offers were made. And all of us can tell when something just makes sense. And this narrative makes sense. There's an offer on the table. there are some variations in play. He offered to put Wilder on an undercard with Joshua in the UK. He claims the purse offer was $5 million. That part I'd like to see verified. That's a pretty incredible number. But he said, listen, come on over here. Let's build up the fight. Let's introduce you to the British fans. You can fight whoever you want. I don't care. He suggested Dominic Brazil. That'd be a big-ass payday for Brazil. He wouldn't say no to that. I can tell you that. And the only possible way this makes sense to me is that Wilder's getting really bad advice, really bad business advice over this. If there's a concern about every little detail because he's worried about having a disadvantage in the fight, worried about losing, which he should be. You know, there's no shame in him worrying about losing a fight to Anthony Joshua, but he needs to understand this is more money than he could ever hope to make in any other circumstance. He needs to get his mind right about taking the risk of losing. I think that is a large part of why he and his team are being so difficult about this. But he better watch out or the train is going to leave the station. Fans are going to be worn out. How worn out are we on this show? If we chew over this stuff week after week, for those listening, we chew this stuff over off the air too, all week long. So we're hip deep in it all the time. But most people who are, even very enthusiastic boxing fans, you know what? They have lives. They have other stuff going on. They generally like other sports as well, a lot of them. And they're going to lose patience with this. These guys have got to get this together. But, if you ask me, and I'm seeing two different stories told, I watched Eddie Hearn talk about this for an hour, unedited. It's a very, unadorned video. I believe him. Bottom line, I believe him.
There's also an excellent write-up on Three Kings Boxing. They dropped an article last night. Just go to threekingsboxing.com. They broke down all the details, the back and forth negotiations, the numbers, and all that as well. Talking about this in the aftermath of apparently no-go for this fight for this year. I'll go to you, Jacob, and Daniel. Your reaction to, again, all that has transpired over the last 24 hours regarding this fight or potential fight.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been in as much of the know as Gail and probably the rest of you guys, but I mean, at the end of the day, I just want to see the top guys fight. I understand that you're trying to make money, and I understand there's negotiations and promotions and sites and dates and all that other stuff that goes along with it, this business. But again, as Gail alluded to, it does get frustrating being a fan because you want to see these fights when they're supposed to happen, not when they're past their expiration date. Or, let's say one of them does fight somebody else and then they lose, and then you're like, oh, what would have happened? And they never fight or something like that. I haven't seen the interview, so I can't speak to whether I think Hearn is telling the truth or not. I trust Gail in the sense that, she's part of the boxing media and she's very smart and can pick up, a lot of that, the signs of, people that are being truthful versus not. My contention's always been that I think both of the fighters want to fight, but it's their people that are advising them or, that have a lot to lose in the sense of money, that are probably holding up these fights. I think if it was up to the boxers, if you just sat them down and said, hey, this is a fair deal, this is what we're going to do, this is what it's going to be at, sign this paper, I think they would do it. But unfortunately, that's not how it works. They have advisors, they have managers, they have, maybe potentially contracts to do this, that, and what. So this is what ends up holding up fights. But, hopefully we'll get to see it. But, I like I say, until that bell rings and they're both in the ring and someone throws the first punch, then I believe it.
Your thoughts, Daniel?
Okay, Gail eloquently explained Eddie Hearn's side of the things in his interview. I'm going to go over Wilder's manager, Shorty Finkel's interview, what he did with WBN regarding this, because we have to see how this shaped up. There was talk 2 weeks ago. Wilder's camp said, we agree in principle to terms. There's words of contracts being exchanged. And then within the last 24 to 48 hours, the WBA out of nowhere orders Joshua to negotiate with Povetkin within 24 hours, or there's going to be a first bid. This is what happened according to Shorty Finkel, according to this interview with WBN. Apparently, Hearn's team sent him a contract, but with no venue and no date listed on it. Only for the day the WBA issues that release, supposedly they get a letter or an email from Matchroom saying, okay, we're not going to fight Wilder next, but we'll fight him after that, April 13th in Wembley. You give that with the timing, you give that with the fact that almost immediately you saw all the players for the Povetkin fight sit down on the table. And there's a little bit of gamesmanship on both sides. I've been fully in the belief that if it were up to just Wilder and Joshua, this would be fight week and we'll be preparing for a fight on the 4th of July. But it's not. There's a possibility that Wilder's really getting bad advice about as far as his leverage. But there's also the fact, just looking at the timing of this, just looking at how everything is starting to shape up, it wouldn't surprise me that Eddie Hearn's the one holding things up and may have called in a favor for the WBA. Because in a way, he has to be compelled to not take a Wilder fight. And one thing you have to know when it comes to Wilder, he has been pretty adamant in saying he wants Joshua. If he's coming to the UK, it's before Joshua. He has thrown Dillian Whyte in front of him. Wilder has said, no, I want Joshua. In this case, now he's saying, no, we'll fight Dominic Brazil. And Wilder's mindset, why am I going to the UK to fight Dominic Brazil? I could just do that in Alabama. I want to fight Joshua. So there's a lot of gamesmanship on both sides. It would not surprise me that Wilder's getting bad advice, but it wouldn't surprise me either that Eddie Hearn also may have taken the wrong lessons from Maypac, and this is where it all comes back down to. We saw Maypac be built up for half a decade, make a boatload of money, but the fight was lackluster compared to what we all wanted it to be. And the lesson that a lot of promoters took from that is we can prolong the situation as long as possible because people are going to be willing to pay for it. The problem with the lesson is Maypac, especially the way it turned out, left a bad taste in people's mouths. That's why people got antsy with 2 years when the first time Canelo Triple G fought. They're going to get impatient with this one too. Because it's not a situation where one fighter's scared of the other. Anthony Joshua's not scared of Deontay Wilder, and Deontay Wilder's not scared of Anthony Joshua. It's mainly business interests that are getting in the way of this. And correct me if I'm wrong, then, Gail, the timing for this, for the Povetkin fight, it looks to be the last week of September.
No, well, it might be for Povetkin when we were talking about a Wilder fight, there was no way you could ask that kind of money for a big pay-per-view. Now, I don't know what their plans are for pay-per-view in the UK. Should a Wilder Povetkin fight come along, that's not a pay-per-view in the United States. It's just not. So the difference in scheduling changes a lot when you're talking about the difference in the opponent and the difference in the revenue model. So, and we have to remind ourselves too, pay-per-views in the UK tend not to be the big blockbuster, $70 hit to your wallet. They're more frequent and more inexpensive. So it's a little bit different story. They can handle a $25 pay-per-view if it's Povetkin. And that's where, if that fight comes off and they can put Wilder on the undercard, I do agree that part of the problem may be, Wilder feeling like he's a more important dance partner and, overestimating his worth. That's a problem. And that does happen with a lot of guys who, on their rise up haven't been used to being considered the B-side in a very, very, very long time. But when two big names get together, one of them has to lead when they're dancing. One of them is going to lead. And if they are going to continue to fight about that, the fans the bottom line with all this is the fans just get worn out by this stuff. When are these guys going to figure it out? For all the money that Mayweather and Pacquiao made, there was so much lasting damage that whatever revenue got generated from that has been eaten back up by the losses and the hits the sport took after the fact. And some of these other negotiations who've thought they could follow that model and were sorely mistaken.
Yep. Well, I asked that in the sense of the fact that one of the things that Eddie Hearn threw prior to this announcement was him, I think, saying in an interview saying, I'm not going to put Anthony Joshua in an 8-week training camp to face Deontay Wilder. Me and Joe, I think we did this last week, we actually counted down the weeks. It's more than 8 weeks from this to the end of September. Now, granted, there was, like I said, that was in the middle of June. But it just feels like there's roadblock after roadblock that's keep throwing it. And it's not the fighter's fault. This should be in the distance where we understand it. Like, we understand people want to blame the fighters because it's easy to blame the fighters. A lot of it, though, is unfortunately behind the scenes. There's a situation where Hearn wants to exercise his best business leverage that he can, and unfortunately, this is the part where Wilder's at a disadvantage because his promoter can't legally act as a promoter.
Well, right, that's part of the problem, and it's let's face it, it's Hearn's job to maximize the revenue. It's his job to make everyone money, including himself. The more there is, the more in theory that goes around. And there is a big difference from a few weeks ago in June when we didn't have a Canelo Triple G rematch, which that was a tectonic plate shift, and that little earthquake goes down and everything falls down the line and changes the strategy because it sucks a lot of the air out of the room for everybody else.
Yeah,
they have to stay away from that now. They can't stage a big-ass fight on the heels of that. And you know what? Come on. Wilder-Joshua was never happening this year. Who are we kidding? It just doesn't even pass the smell test. It's going to be fine. It'll be next spring. Everyone needs just to calm down. Calm down, pour a drink, watch the World Cup, for Christ's sake. Come on.
Yeah, but it's still just because it comes off as folks on both sides teasing us with a possible fight this year. and now it's not going to happen this year, and folks anticipating that. It's like, what was the point of doing all this? You're playing with our emotions, if you will. Um, I'm still going to sit back and say that the fight will happen at some point, but they do need to be careful about it because we don't want to fall into uh, Mayweather Pacquiao territory. Um, but because of all this stuff and because of the things that transpired the last 24 hours, and because of all the commentary from Joshua fans, from Wilder fans, from folks in the middle, stands on both sides, again, for me, it's like, okay, I'm tired of it. It's a lot of word salads. It's a lot of senseless dribble, and I want to not really talk about those two fighting each other until the fight happens. Until then, let them fight whoever. Let the other heavyweights out there fight each other, and let's move on because there's more going on in the sport than just those fights, and we should pay attention to that, uh, embrace and acknowledge and embrace that until uh, J- Wilder and Joshua finally um, get in the ring. Let's move on to some previews, previewing some fights, and one fight really I want to focus on. Zerto Ramirez, I'll go to you, Daniel. Zerto Ramirez is going to be fighting this Saturday in Oklahoma against a guy by the name of Angulo. Um, from what I've read, Angulo can pop. His record suggests that he can pop at what is it, 23-0, 20 knockouts. The problem is, and I've been trying to find some information, some video of him. Uh, The only video I've seen of Angulo is from 4 or 5 years ago. There's a 2 minute short clip of him of a fight apparently that took place a year ago. But most of the stuff I've seen of him extended action is from 4 or 5 years ago. So given that, given his opposition, which has not been strong, he may be able to punch, but we really don't know how good he is. Uh, Given that, your thoughts on this fight that's taking place this weekend? Daniel, and then you, Jacob.
First, it's a very interesting choice of venue, which shows that they're really trying to test out how good they can sell Zerto. Because Mexican fighter, you don't really think, okay, let's put him in Oklahoma. But it might be a different situation. It might be a similar situation to what we saw with Julius and Dongo. Remember before the Toriowski fight? Because before then, it was very, very hard to find footage of Julius and Dongo. But then he wound up shocking the world. I'm not saying that Angulo is going to wind up shocking the world, even though his record's 23-0, 20 knockouts. But we also have to take into account, if we haven't seen any footage, it may just be because the competition really hasn't been that good. May have been, okay, got 20 knockouts, but there's 20 knockouts of C-level fighters. And Zerto's a champion. He earned this championship. But unfortunately, with Zerto, he has this tendency, unfortunately, to fight down to the level of his opposition. So if he gets to a point where Angulo does catch him and it winds up being an upset, it's going to be a lesson learned for him, because the Gilberto Ramirez that people want to see is the one that fought Abraham. And every subsequent fight then has diminished that win by maybe Ramirez just caught an old Abraham. And we know, unfortunately, now there's no unification fight coming in the future, because David Benavidez chose to stick with Samson Boxing and not try to put them in a legal battle with Top Rank. So it's more or less probably a showcase fight. Is this going to be on ESPN Plus or regular ESPN?
Give me a quick second.
I believe it's an ESPN Plus fight once again. But yeah,
Okay.
we'll have to verify that for the fans.
It is on. I'm looking it up. It's on ESPN and ESPN Deportes.
There you go. So no
Okay.
plus. Good.
Okay, that's good.
No, it's not. I want plus.
Well, folks listening are going to start thinking we're all on the ESPN Plus payroll, but seriously.
Well, I don't have a subscription for it, so
well, it's $5 you can spend, folks.
I'll settle for a free subscription if they want to.
I'm sure y'all will.
Your thoughts on the fight, Jacob, and then you can follow up, Gail.
But were you done, Daniel? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut in.
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, kind of the same lines that Daniel basically said right now. Usually when a fighter, you can't find them, especially in this day and age with YouTube and just the technology that's out there. If you can't find something on somebody, usually there's a reason. Maybe, they're not as spectacular as their record, points out. If you look at this, he's a Colombian fighter. If you look at his the fighters that he's fought, I mean, I don't really see any names there. I mean, he's like a 4 fights removed from a guy that was 2-33. Okay, 2 wins, 33 losses, and then even 3 fights removed, 6-19. So I don't think he's this competition he's fighting, and even if you look at his more recent fights, I mean, they haven't gone on to do anything. So maybe he does have pop. Maybe this will be his coming out party, but I wouldn't bet on it. I think, to Daniel's point, I think he's correct. Ramirez does tend to fight to his competition. But I also do think that when he faces somebody that kind of, that's willing to throw back and give him a fight, it kind of jumpstarts him a little bit too. Yeah, he'll stick in there. So I'm going with Ramirez on this one. Shocker. But like his fight with Hart, it was a good fight. They were throwing. So I think Ramirez is probably going to win this pretty comfortably. I don't think by knockout. He's more of a decision guy. But I mean, it would be impressive if he won by knockout.
Your thoughts, Gail?
This is a little bit of a head scratcher card to me. Aram, to his credit, is really good about trying to develop lots of different markets and test in the waters. And, we are in those dog days of boxing summer, and folks in Oklahoma, I'm going to just go full blown right here and stereotype that they are probably not watching the World Cup. Their colleges are out for the summer, college sports, that's gone. There's just not a lot else going on. Hey, world-class boxing, ESPN's coming to our city. Well, let's go check that out. Test to see what the potential marketplace is. It's not costing him a lot. He's not having to pay a lot. I'm sure he got great terms because there's no whole elf lot going on there right now. He's got this great deal with ESPN, easy to produce it. They've got the infrastructure there. They know the area. Again, the college sports means the infrastructure is there. And, why not give it a shot? To what's been said before, we were all so excited about Zurdo, especially after the Abraham fight. And he's just stalled. His career has just plain stalled. There's been very little growth in admittedly, he, had that timeout for injury, which was really unfortunate timing. I like him personally. I like what he has to offer as a human being. I perceive that he has a very good work ethic. He's worked very hard to learn English. I promise you, he went to every possible media appearance and fan appearance he could in Oklahoma leading up to this fight. But he's got to show me something here quick, or my attention's going to wander. It just is. He's got to show something more than what we've seen. If it's just more of the same sort of middling level performances, I think I'm out. He should have no problem with this guy. Jacob is right. Look at this guy's record. There's a reason there's no video on him. Come on. We're not really thinking there's going to be a Julius Ndongo or Joe Smith Jr. sort of, oh my God, where did this guy come from? And Arum doesn't do that to his fighters. He knows better. His matchmakers aren't going to put a fight like that together. Heck no. Will I watch it? Yeah, it's boxing. I'm gonna watch it. You never know, but I'm going in with very low expectations.
I feel that Ramirez is going to win based on what little bit I've seen. Could always be an upset because again, the word is that this guy Angulo can punch, but again, skill wise, his level of opposition Angulo is just not there. And based on the little clips I've seen, Ramirez is the better technical fighter, so I'm going to go with him. For me, the interesting part will be who does he call out? What does Top Rank say about him and his future following an expected win? That's what I'm interested in. The juicy matchup would be
Benavidez. That's the difficult part.
Would be Benavidez, but Benavidez has, I think, re-up with Heyman.
No, it's with Samson Boxing. It's not that they're re-upped. It's that I think he got the advice that you don't want to go through this legal battle. So he just returned the signing bonus that Top Rank gave him and said, "Here's your money back. I'm sticking with Samson."
Yeah, Benavidez went off and negotiated with Uncle Bob, and his promoter reminded him, "Wait a minute, son. You have a contract with me that you signed through 2021. So you want out of that? We need to see you in court." And they didn't want to get into that kind of mess. So return the money, no harm done. But makes it really tough to then have face-to-face negotiations, put together a fight when your guy went behind your back and tried to make a better deal for himself when his career started to take off. So lesson learned for young Mr. Benavidez, and I don't know who his personal advisors are, but somebody should have read the fine print.
Yeah, I think part of it is just the mere fact that, well, it's becoming a trend when it comes to Heyman fighters. Just the words are starting to leak out that they're not happy with the deals that Heyman has made for them. There's only been a few fighters that are willing to stick around, but it's starting to look like they're starting to see some defections. As far as with Ramirez, like who he wound up calling out, if you take Benavidez out of the equation, because he has a mandatory fight with Anthony Durrell coming up now. It's the logical guy would be either the winner of the World Boxing Super Series. It means it's either going to be George Groves or Callum Smith. Or if you can convince James DeGale and the IBF to get out of this purse bid that they just launched on July 5th with him and Jose Usatagi to say, no, we're going to unify a fight and let's do this, because right now, after the last few fights, James MIguel is ripe for the picking. So that would be the move to make if you're Zurdo Ramirez. Whether they will be made, that's another question.
Yeah, and I think we're going to start shut things down on that note. Going to go around the panel here. Begin the show starting with ladies first. Going to close the show starting with ladies first. Gail from Communities Digital News, for those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk small business advice, Dancing with the Stars, Game of Thrones. Let the people know where they can find you.
You can find me in my regular home. It's Communities Digital News, an online news organization based out of Washington, D.C., although I'm in Southern California. And that is COMM, C-O-M-M, Digi, D-I-G-I, News, comdiginews.com.
Jacob from Jab Hook, for those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk movies, let the people know where they can hit you up.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show, Mike, and shout out to Gus, Bo, EJ, For Boxing News crew, and everybody, and all the people on the chat. But yeah, I could be found at JRATM23 if you want to talk boxing or movies, and I'm there, and hopefully I can catch some people at a live fight.
Daniel from the Inscriber, for those who want to talk boxing, for those who want to talk NBA, particularly when it comes to Miami Heat, for those who want to check you out, clap back on at ignorant stuff on Twitter. Let the people know where they can find you.
Yes, folks, you can find me on Twitter at Rawkus99, RAWKUZ99. Like I said, I do a show with folks at FortBoxNews.com. It's mainly up right now on their website, so they'll be able to hear from them there. But it may be moved to multiple locations pretty soon, and definitely, obviously, since next week is the 4th of July, we're going to take the week off, but we're going to have a lot to talk about the week afterwards because, well, there's a good chance Pacquiao Matisse might implode in everybody's face.
Oh dear. Oh dear. For those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk music, for those who want to talk fitness, you know what it is on Twitter. Brother JR at Brother JR76. As I said to begin the show, if you want to check out all information regarding Pound for Pound Box Report, P4P Box Report, .wordpress.com is the link. Check the right of the blog page. You can find links to the channels and pages on G+, YouTube, Twitter, Tumblr. You can also find links to what I listen to the show on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher Radio, Player FM, and Mixcloud. We'll probably go the Daniel route and take next week off because it is a holiday. And what I may do is return in 2 weeks to do a recap of Ramirez, Angulo, and do a preview of Pacquiao and Matisse. A very good card, by the way, low key, very good card. Pacquiao, Matisse, Muhammad Wasim. He's finally going to get his opportunity to fight for a world title on that Pacquiao undercard. And for real boxing geeks, there is a junior flyweight belts happening. Fighter from by the name of Ben Liu, from I believe China. Very young, doesn't have many fights, but he is an impressive, really impressive fighter to keep an eye on. I think he maybe 20 years old. I can't remember his correct age, but real amateur sensation. Just keep an eye out on him. Just keep in mind of that name, Ben Liu. He's fighting Carlos Canizales for Canizales' belt as junior flyweight. And may also talk Jose Ramirez. He's going to be fighting also in an interim within that week off interim. So we will talk about those fights, no doubt. So for Gail for Communities Digital News, Jacob from the Inscriber, Jacob from Jab Hook, Daniel from the Inscriber. I want to thank everybody who joined us in the chat. Kay Izzle, aka Miss Vicious Fox. Again, check her out in her Twitch page, her gaming page on Twitch by the same name, Miss Vicious Fox. Very good gaming page on Twitch. Thank Bo from Truth and Facts. Sean, he joined us as well. This has been episode 213, Pound for Pound Boxing Report. I'm your host, Michael. We will see you probably in 2 weeks. So everyone else, have a good evening. Good night.
Later.
Good night, folks. If you want to watch heavyweight boxing right now, replay of Wilder Ortiz on ESPN Showtime Extreme.
Nice.